Hi,
Okay,
Tim.
got it,
Thanks.
and I'll hit the, got it there. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for helping with my project. I was wondering if you could say a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, first off, I've I've been a space freak or nut since the age of 4. I was born at Nellis Air Force Base in 1955, and we lived next door to Mike Collins, as it happens, before he was an astronaut. And he remembered before he died. I'd met him a couple times at various times as an adult, and he remembers me climbing all over his car in the shared carport. That he told me it really pissed him off. Uh, we, uh, my dad, like I say, was in the Air Force, so that was Nellis Air Force Base. He went to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. That was in '63, and he ended up retiring there. And so I grew up in Dayton. And in December of '63, I moved. I moved to Phoenix. I was, had turned 18 at the end of October that year. So, boom, gone. Um, so I was reading space stuff from the age of from first grade at least. I have a copy of a book called "You Will Go to the Moon" by Ira and May Freeman, and they lied. I will not go to the moon. I'm 66 in a month, and I'm not there. They lied to me, and I'm pissed about it. I've been pissed about it ever since. I've been pissed ever since I found out. My dad had to tell me that the moon base on the TV show Men into Space in 1959 was fiction. So that's kind of where I have been coming from. I was an active in the L5 Society throughout the 80s in the San Francisco Bay Area, where I'd moved working in Silicon Valley, and in '89 in March I went to work in Congress for Congressman Dana Rohrabacher as his space and science guy from his first his original staff. He was a newly elected Congress critter at that point. And so my big claim to fame under him, at least, I think, was that I got the DCX funded and kept it funded through its flight program. I'm really proud of that. And ended up going to work in the Senate. So I was on the Senate Commerce Committee staff for 2 years as a space expert. And then the Senator Pressler lost his election, so we all got fired. And I had to find a job. And I ended up working as a lobbyist then for Pete Conrad. So I worked for Pete up until shortly after he died. It's his Washington presence for the various companies he had, space companies. And once he died, they eventually ended up, firing me, laying me off. They didn't. The company involved actually is now owned by Swedish Space Corporation, the former Universal Space Network now. And so I ended up having to get a job. So I ended up working in the Pentagon. I got hired by a friend of mine who was a space nut, Bill Bruner, Colonel Bruner. Then now he's been out of the Air Force for many years now. A guy running a company now called New Frontier Aerospace. He's running that company, founded that company, but I think he still works at Livermore. Anyway, I was at the Pentagon on the Iraq policy desk for 5 years. And at NASA for 6 months as a political appointee. And then Obama got elected, and I had to find a job. And ever since then, I've been working for, of all people, the Social Security Administration as a 1-800 number operator.
Wow, that is
So I've
quite
been with
a
12
career.
years. Well, and I've been with them 12 years now. I'm here in Houston, Texas, although not because of space per se. I was here because my son, I gotten hired by Social Security in Albuquerque, and I was able to transfer here to get my son through high school, who was autistic. And we managed to do that, and he's off and doing something. He's 22, and I don't know even. He's a couple couple miles from here, but I don't really know what he's doing. He doesn't want me to know, and that's fine. But
I understand. My oldest son is 23 and my youngest son is 19. So there's
yeah. Yeah, and I've got a 39-year-old stepdaughter. We thought we were done when my wife and I with her, but then the 20, my son came along, but before him, my daughter, who's 25. So she's off in Virginia at Virginia Commonwealth University, taking an art degree as well as an engineering degree.
which part of Houston do you live in? I also live in Houston. I'm up
Uh,
here in the Spring Tomball area.
okay, I'm in Pearland.
Oh, okay. Way down there near Space Center Houston direction at least.
Well, at least in that direction, yeah. It's about a half hour, 45-minute drive from here, but but yeah, and Rudy's down there by the over by the former God, I can't remember their name anymore. The electronics store. Anyway, that went belly up.
Oh, Fry's Electronics, the one that looks like
Yeah,
a space station right
that
there
had
by.
that had the International Space Station mock-up essentially inside in their ceiling.
Yeah, no, that's pretty neat. The one up here on near 45 near Beltway 8 was like
that was
oil
sad.
derrick and oil workers and stuff. So that was kind of neat how they have their different theme stores. I know they in like the San Jose area they had like one that's like volcano theme and stuff
Well,
like that.
yeah, that's in Milpitas. I was working across the street from the original Fry's at one point. I worked for Anybody remember Western Electric? It was my first job as an engineer, and so I'm a retired telephone engineer. Oh my God! And they were Western Electric in Sunnyvale was right across the street from where the very first Fry's opened up. So I remember my girlfriend at the time buying 2 Macintoshes from them, both at the same time. It's a long story. Ostensibly it was for the ranch that she and her family ran. Yeah. Okay. So she bought one for Dad, and then the other was for her.
That is.
This was in the Macs were brand new. Woohoo!
Right,
Anyway,
like 1984 time frame.
80, absolutely, yeah.
The reason why 1984 is not going to be like 1984.
Yeah, yep. And I saw a Mac before in '83 because one of my, again, the L5 Society. We had a couple of our people worked at Apple, and one of the people there in our chapter, active in our chapter, had designed the flyback transformer on the Mac, and he had one at his house, so which is where we all first saw one.
You mentioned you were really active in the L5 Society, and that of course merged with another organization, become the National Space Society. Considering your
let me do this real quick. Yeah, the National SS, founded by Werner von Braun, a former Nazi.
Yes, there's that too. You have
I love
to be
doing that.
but with setting that point aside, were you ever involved in the Clear Lake National Space Society that they have
I
down there?
never was. Yeah, again, I've only been here in Houston 7 years.
Okay.
So no, but again, the Silicon Valley L5 Society, as Silicon Valley was the South Bay L5 Society. It was what was the official chapter name. Then there was one in Berkeley, and then there was one in San Francisco, and we set another one up in Marin County.
It seems like L5 was really active, and do you know anything about why it merged with that other organization?
Well, yeah, and it's real simple. Mark Hopkins wanted to take over the National Space Society, National Space Institute, and the National Space Institute needed a bigger membership base, and so Mark, Mark was running the L5 Society into the ground. And as he's run the National Space Society for years into the ground too, I have a lot of animus with respect to Mark. A remarkable individual. Mark is responsible for one of the great institutions in pro-space organizations. He basically founded the Space Frontier Foundation by driving everyone competent out of the National Space Society. Anyway, that's my opinion, including myself. I won't have anything to do with NSS.
That's interesting. Yeah, I started a National Space Society chapter up here in the north part of town. I called the North Houston Space Society. So we're actually having our first hybrid meeting this coming Saturday. So I'm kind of excited. Our first option to have an in-person meeting since the COVID lockdown. So it'll be interesting to see who might come. But
well, in any case, right. Well, go ahead. This is your interview.
Oh no, I was just gonna say I don't do much with the national organization. I just thought, I wanted to create like a little local club, and it seemed better than just doing something from scratch to kind of do something that was associated with kind of a bigger organization. But I think I'd love to see that all that activity that you kind of hinted at around the L5 Society come back.
Okay, well, to be blunt, I don't remember a lot of it because I'm going to be 66 at the end of October, and I was doing all that in my late 20s and 30s, and I know that in a very general way, I can tell you what we were doing in that time and place. Bill Dale, a gentleman, William Dale, Bill Dale, was also majorly responsible for the activity at the time. He now lives just a little bit southeast of San Antonio. He finally he had a house in Milpitas, and because he had a house in Milpitas that he bought in the 70s, Milpitas, California, and just sold it 2 years ago, he made a bundle. But that house was kind of like the locus for all the activity, all the action. And we'd have monthly meetings with interesting speakers. We were able to get places to meet in Silicon Valley from a lot of our members, because a lot of the companies had auditoria that we could use and that we did, and we get various speakers from NASA Ames or from Berkeley. Or from Stanford, or from UC Santa Cruz, from the astronomy folks there. Was never able to get Heinlein there. I would have loved to have gotten him to come talk to us, but that was a bridge too far.
Have you read much Heinlein?
I'm sorry?
Oh, have you read much of Robert Heinlein's books?
Well, I ran his centennial in 1907. In Kansas City. Yeah, big Heinlein fan.
Yeah, me too. I think the first science fiction I ever read was A Door into Summer.
Well, Asimov was my first, but that's it's a long story, because I started out reading space things, and rather than, and this is in 1960 and 61, and what they had in the library were things by Fletcher Pratt and by Martin Caden, who I never met, damn it. Unfortunately, I would have loved to have met him. And some folks like that, and they would, in their books on space, mention the science fiction stuff. So we moved to Wright-Patterson in November of 1963, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. We were in these wooden barracks while we were waiting for housing in Page Manor, which is housing area for the base, referred to by the denizens as Page Manure. But anyway, great place to grow up at, actually, at the time. Anyway, but because we're in these wooden barracks in what's called Wood City, which is Area C of Wright-Patterson, the library was right nearby. We're all sick. We were all sick. We'd caught flu. My mom, I'm an only child, so it was my mom and dad, and they're busy sick, and I get better. I go over to the library and I check out Asimov's I, Robot, which is, okay, I've heard of this book. Okay. And one of the reasons it's such a vivid memory is that some idiot during the climax of the story Little Lost Robot had left a cigarette burn in it through a couple of the pages right there during the climax. So that was my first SF. But once we got into Page Manure, the nearest library, rather than the base library, was something called the Burkhart branch of the Dayton and Montgomery County Public Library. And I went in and I started checking the space books out, and a few science fiction books, and the librarian there, and I wish I remembered her name or knew her name. Basically, it was the first one's free, little boy. Here, try this one. For the Heinlein, I also looked out on Heinlein. This kid who was 3 blocks away from me, three houses at Page Manor, his mother was a big Heinlein fan. So I remember when going into the Burkhart branch one day, and there was, this would have been in 1966, and there was Heinlein's new book, Moon is a Harsh Mistress. So I got it. I checked it out immediately, and right after I finished it, I loaned it to Mrs. McCarty.
That's awesome. I love the Moon is a Harsh Mistress, and the pseudo sequel of The Cat Who Walks Through Walls.
Yeah, pseudo sequel is right. Yeah.
I guess, what is your favorite Heinlein book?
Don't believe it or not, Beyond This Horizon.
Okay.
Which makes sound a little weird, but I've been a big fan of that book, and there's a reason. It's the only book I know of, actually, the only science fiction that I'm aware of. There may be other stuff out there that addresses this, but Heinlein, in that book, he says, okay, all the physical problems are solved. What the hell do we do now? That's a pretty big question. What it basically boils down to, what is the purpose of life, if you really got down to it. Now, you might disagree with his answers as presented in that book, and I do, but that's not it. That's a big question to ask, and he asks it. And as somebody in the book says, this sticks in my mind. The main protagonist, Hamilton Felix, doesn't want to reproduce. He's a starline genetically, and they want him to reproduce with this other person, get married and have kids, because that will produce this, some genetically very, very advanced kids. But he doesn't see any point in it. And he wants to know, what's the purpose in living? Why bother? And somebody, the genetics doctor head, the so-called encyclopedic synthesist, Claude Morden, was explaining this to the person who works for him, the main head geneticist, and that person, the character goes, well, that's stupid. And Claude Morden, that's really a silly question. And Claude goes, well, yeah, except he didn't ask it stupidly. He asked it very intelligently.
I was wondering if you were familiar with the philosophical school of thought called absurdism, Albert Camus.
Well, I'm a Firesign Theater fan. Does that qualify me?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. Oh, these are boy, they're absurdists. They're surrealists. Uh, if you don't know the Firesign Theater, you are missing out on the greatest, um, some of the greatest comedy of the 20th century.
And what is it called? Can you say it again?
The It's the Firesign Theater. The Sign of Fire. They're four guys that got together in '66, and uh, they were all fire signs. There's astrology, which I think is a load of old crap, but that doesn't matter. And they a good place to start with their stuff would be probably it's a record called "I Think We're All Bozos on This Bus."
I'll have to check it out. I'm taking notes now.
Oh man, you're gonna love it. And then actually right after that, or maybe even before that, you should try the Tale of the Giant Rat of Sumatra, which is their Sherlock Holmes takeoff.
Giant
And they
Tale of the
the
Rat.
Giant Rat of Sumatra. Oh yeah. And then they have a wonderful Shakespeare takeoff called Anything You Want to.
I got a feeling a lot of my time
It's
may have just
Hamlet
gotten
and a
absorbed.
whole bunch of it's Hamlet, as well as they've shoved in every other Shakespeare play they can. It's screamingly funny.
Well,
if you know Shakespeare at all.
I
Otherwise,
love Shakespeare. I went to go watch Hamlet and another play. I'm trying to remember what it was at the Globe Theatre in London. So that
oh
was a lot of
God, I
fun.
would have loved to. I would love to do that. I've never been out of the continental U.S. That would be great.
I think you would totally like it. They've kind of tried to rebuild, the Globe, similar to what I guess they believe it was back then. And I think,
Right.
after that fire in London, there was like some decree that there couldn't be any thatch roofs, and they actually got a exemption for the Globe so they could make it more historically accurate, I think.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. After the big London fire.
But coming back to absurdism, I mean,
Okay.
the way I understood
Sorry.
absurdism is that humanity is looking for meaning in a universe that's completely devoid of one, and it's kind of like reconcile these two irreconcilable ideas, which ultimately boils down to you have to go out and create your own meaning. And I was wondering, first of all,
That
um,
sounds like me, frankly.
and I guess how does one go about doing that? I mean, what are your thoughts?
God, that's a great question. It's a stumper because I have no idea. I ended up where I am, how I am, from being a kid in the time and place I got raised. And my mom was a Methodist. My dad was a Catholic. In fact, he was a excommunicated Catholic because of mom was his second marriage. I'm a bastard. They got married a month after I was born. So in any case, so I'm growing up on an Air Force base in the '60s and reading, in that time and place and stuff. And religion didn't take. I just didn't have the gene. So, and I was always struck as a teenager by a line from Bob Dylan, which is if you're going to be um, oh God, if you're going to be an outlaw, you'd better have a code.
Hmm.
And that kind of sums it up, at least how I always kind of thought of it. Now, what? So if you're living in a universe where you don't believe in God or in anything that created the universe, and you're a kid or a teenager, and you're going, okay, well, what is the meaning of life? and you kind of, from your initial premises, have come to the assumption that, well, there is no inherent meaning of any sort whatsoever. Um, okay, then what do you do next? Well, okay, well, I want to. I want to go out and live on the frontier, just like all my heroes I've been reading about, and so forth. Well, that brings you, into trying to do stuff in space, and that's kind of what, in a sense, I'm lucky. That's been with me all my life. I have no idea where that isn't the case for somebody. I don't know what they do.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. I think maybe our heroes of the past had a little bit more depth than the kind of like the things that grab our attention now. The YouTuber and TikTok star, which seems to be all about attention seeking as opposed to having some grand adventure.
Yeah, and my heroes at the time, as a young man or younger, as a kid, you were Chuck Yeager, were Bill Bridgman, man, and I worked with him, and I can't bring his name up. Scott Crossfield. These folks. Um, the rocket pilots, the rocket plane pilots, and then the astronauts. Oh my God! Here we have these guys, space pilots, for God's sake, and then the writers uh, of these things, the folks that wrote about them. Martin Caidin. I would have loved to have met him. It's one of my regrets, because I would have had a chance to do that. But anyway, um, and Heinlein and Asimov and Clark. Uh, Clark's had more of an effect on me, I think, because of Clark's space. Um, well, I mean, Heinlein and Clark. Heinlein in fiction and Clark in nonfiction, writing about space and about the promise of space and so forth. And God, John W. Campbell. I got. Okay, and this may be a little inside baseball, but okay. So John W. Campbell Jr. was the editor, began to be the editor in 1938 of what was then called Astounding Science Fiction, which became Analog Science Fiction Science Fact in 1960. And during a period of the 60s, early 60s, he changed the format to try to sell the magazine to a larger audience into a bed sheet size. And these bed sheet, my mom had a friend who gave, this is around the time of Apollo 11, who gave me a bunch of these bed sheet astoundings, analogs rather. And there were, at that time, Campbell ran a whole series of science articles about extraterrestrial resource usage. It was the first time and place that anybody was writing about it. Scoop mining Jupiter's atmosphere, things like that. Okay, wow, all right, geez. In other words, we have extraterrestrial resources, and we can expand the resource base for the human race. Wow, yeah, cool. Their doomsday has been canceled. Great.
There's one science fiction author that lived during those times that was very prolific, and I just discovered in like maybe 2013, 2014 that I don't hear people talk much about, and I'm sure there's lots of them, but I was wondering, have you heard of Frederick Pohl?
Oh yeah. Oh my God. Pohl is a major. Again, one thing I forgot to mention. I ran. Once a year there's a World Science Fiction Convention. I ran a World Science Fiction Convention in 1978. I'm the youngest WorldCon chairman ever, and still. So I'm fairly, for better or worse, I'm really familiar with the history of science fiction. And Frederick Pohl plays a major role in it. beginning about 1938. In forming or helping to form what were called the Futurians. And he was an editor of a whole bunch of science fiction magazines at the time. He's 18 or 19, and they're giving him these magazines to edit. So he gets he gets articles or stories from his friends, like Isaac Asimov. So Pohl, beginning in the 50s, begins to write fiction himself. Yeah, he's been writing it before that, but he writes fiction, publishes things along with Cyril Kornbluth, the Space Merchants being the one I'm thinking of right there, but becomes a major writer and a major force, both as an editor and as a writer. He edits Galaxy in the 60s, as Galaxy magazine, as well as the Worlds of If magazine during the 60s. And during the 70s, he's not an editor for that and starts to write things like Man Plus and, which is a novel, Gold at the Starbo's End, which is a novella, and a whole bunch of other important stories. The Heechee series, God, I can't remember the name of the
Gateway.
first Heechee novel.
It's called Gateway?
Gateway, right, thank you. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm sorry. Fred Pohl. In fact, I almost lost the manuscript of Clark and Pohl's book, The Last Theorem.
Yes. Actually, I have that book too. I thought it was fairly well done.
I haven't read it yet. I haven't for whatever, but that's another story. But at the 2007 Heinlein Centennial, which was in Kansas City, he was there, and he had left a briefcase with the manuscript for that he was editing, and I was supposed to get it back to him, and I screwed up getting it back to him.
Well, anyway. He was still able to.
It got back to him eventually.
Okay, cool. Sometimes the rewrites are better than the original. Anyway, so I didn't know if the reason it turned out so well may have been because he didn't get that manuscript.
Well, he was editing it. He brought it with him to work on. So anyway.
So what was it like growing up in the Apollo era? Like, what really stuck out for you?
Okay, well, and again, you have to realize too that I'm in a weird area for that. At the same time, I'm living on an Air Force base during the Apollo era, or my dad retires in '67, so we had to move off base housing, but still, it wasn't. We moved 3 blocks. Everybody around where I lived, who, if they weren't in base housing, they were either working on the base as civilians or were retired military or whatever. So it was, I wasn't cloistered per se. I won't say that, but I think that would be a different environment than, say, Columbus, Ohio, versus Dayton, Ohio. But what it was like, seemed normal to me. The TV show The Wonder Years, the kid in that is my age at that time, in that time and place. So, and that was what it was like, except I never had a girlfriend like Danica, what's her face. I ended up with what I think was a better girlfriend, but that's not important now. Another science fiction fan and so forth and so on. But, so we had 2 TV stations in Dayton at the time, and then the UHF station you could get was out of Cincinnati, 40, 45, 60 miles to the south of Dayton. And that was the ABC station. So the 2 stations in Dayton itself were CBS and NBC. And of course, if you wanted to do any space stuff, you watch CBS. And I remember, for example, and I don't know why I remember this so strongly, but they had coverage of the first flight, TV coverage of the first flight of a Titan 3C launch. I remember watching that. Why? Which kind of gives you a flavor for what people were at the networks were kind of finding important. I saw Star Trek when it came on originally, but I had to sneak downstairs to do it because it was after my bedtime. Okay, so that's 66, 7, and 8. You get Arthur Clarke because of 2001. But because of 2001 was on a lecture tour, so I remember going to Springfield to see him on this lecture tour. That was great fun. Along with another friend of mine, Laura McNeil, who was a Heinlein fan and a Clarke fan. So my mom drove us over there. Growing up, it was 2001 was an event, that's for certain. Hello?
It's
okay.
interesting.
Okay.
2001
quiet
was
there for a second.
so different than what it was in the the movie. The Soviet Union no longer exists. We don't have we only have people in low Earth orbit. It's kind of
yeah, 2001 was definitely not like the movie. But then the movie itself, I will argue strongly that it is an absolute frigging masterpiece. Over and above, it has dated well, I think, and my God, we still can't do most of the stuff that they did. We're not on the moon. We don't have a moon base. For that matter, the 1959 TV series Men into Space, we can't do any of the stuff they were doing in any of those episodes. At least yet. We're just now starting to be able to. So, what I'm seeing now, or what I'm seeing happen now with space stuff, and I'm at a distance, is my childhood deferred. It's my childhood dreams and wishes and desires are finally only now happening, and I'm 66, and so I'm a little angry about that.
I understand. I have a sentence for you. I want you to see what you think about it. The 2020s are
the rocket 20s.
Well, the rocket 20s are I've heard some people call them the true space age also, but I was going to say the 2020s are what the people living in 1960s thought the 1970s were going to be.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Well, at least it's happening now.
At least it's actually happening. Yeah, please. Thank you. Thank God. And I don't believe in God. But yeah. I'm glad I'm here to see it.
Think the grand simulator designer.
Clarke once said, and I think he's right, that the space age started 50 years too soon, and it was forced into existence by the space race, the competition with the Soviet Union.
Indeed.
And Apollo was pure politics. Kennedy could have cared less. Kennedy, and unfortunately, I've really researched this, believe it or not. Kennedy had, throughout his presidency, from the beginning, tried to interest the Russians in a joint lunar program. Give me a second. How do you mean?
Yeah. So I mean, it's really amazing with what's happening with the 2020s. And oh, have you heard of Homer Hickman?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I went to the Interstellar Symposium in Tucson last weekend, and Homer was one of the dinner speakers. And he was talking about how he used to live in a coal mine town whenever he was a boy. And
Right, in Pennsylvania, if I remember right.
yeah, and Senator Kennedy was going around trying to get votes and stuff. And he had uh, Homer had sent the Senator Kennedy talking to a group of miners, and he went over to see what's up. And Senator Kennedy was like had asked the question. Homer's like, oh, and I think had does anybody have any questions or anything? And Homer says, well, what's your space policy? And Kennedy says, well, what do you think it should be? And Homer says, well, I think we should go to the moon and mine it. And so he's like, and Kennedy says, well, you elect me, and that's exactly what we'll do, or something like that. So Homer says, he's like, uh, feels like he planted the idea of going to the moon in Kennedy at that time. I thought that's kind of interesting, funny story.
Well, that's possible, but it sounds more, again from what I've read and seen of the Kennedy administration. I don't think that the Johnson sold it to Kennedy, and Johnson was a true space nut. This is the short, quick version of this, and the only reason that Kennedy asked at all was because he was after something. Gagarin gets flown. 3 or 4 days later, Bay of Pigs happens. And he's up against it. He needs something. Kennedy needs something he's getting pummeled by the Russians. He has at least internationally, and in terms of just geopolitical pressures, have something. So that's he goes. One of the things he tasks Johnson with is, okay, because Johnson had gotten this, gotten the task to be the space czar. In other words, to do two things: keep him out of the way, and also not have to bother Kennedy with any of those issues. So he sells them on going to the moon, and that's what happens in his speech. An hour speech of which going to the moon is only a small segment. People don't look at that. It's a long speech, and it has a lot of other stuff in it. And going to the moon is near the end of it. And at the time, Kennedy comes out of that speech thinking Congress had basically completely reacted badly about it. He tells Ted Sorensen he thought that it was a dud. He finds out a little differently over the next few days because Johnson had gotten the congressional leadership behind it beforehand. But nevertheless, again, Kennedy, it was all geopolitical politics to him. He couldn't have cared less about space whatsoever.
And I guess, in terms of us going back to the moon, I know, George Bush Sr. had talked about at one point, and then George Bush Jr. had talked about at one point, and and then, under the Trump and Pence administration, seriously, seems a lot more in reach now.
Has changed.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. In the election, in the nomination issues, the Republican nomination process that Trump wins, Gingrich had been a member of, and he fell out early. But Gingrich goes, let's go back to the moon during that, and gets pilloried, ridiculed for it. Okay, now it's a nothing burger. Yeah, let's go back to the moon. I don't know what
Well,
changed.
and it's I mean, Gingrich had actually proposed a bill in the House that said, if 50,000 U.S. resident or
Yeah,
citizens go to the moon, then
model
it.
model on the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 and the process in the Constitution as to how one becomes a state. Yeah.
It was kind of interesting. But so when did you find out that we were planning to send people to the moon in 2024 for the first time since 1972?
Oh, boy, that's a great question. I mean, I've kept obviously I've kept up with things. I haven't been involved in space politics or working for a space company or anything like that. It must have been sometime in that first year of the Trump administration.
And when you heard that, what did you think?
Yeah, damn, about time. Okay, now a secondary question or a secondary reaction was 2024. Okay, yeah, maybe yes, maybe no, maybe 25 or 6, but that's good. Let's shoot for it.
Well, at the end of 2019, Bridenstine brings in Doug Laverio to head the Human Exploration Operations Directorate. And Doug Laverio is charged with actually getting us to the moon by 2024. And whenever he had his first big NASA meeting on Artemis Day, um, he had a lapel pin that had the number of days to the end of 2024, which he was going to update every single day to keep it laser focused on making that date. And he was also highlighting a NASA person each day that was contributing to making that happen. So that was actually the
Cool. Okay.
inspiration for this project. Of course, unfortunately, Doug had to leave NASA right
Yeah.
before Bob and the other Doug went on the SpaceX capsule because of some contracting issues. But it's kind of interesting that focus. It seems like there's still a desire to go back to the moon, but delays with the SLS and spacesuits and the human landing contract and funding and
Yeah.
lots of other things are starting to be more and more of a challenge.
Yeah, it's and it doesn't matter. Elon's going to land. Elon's going to go to the moon, whether it's under a NASA aegis with NASA helping to foot part of the bill or not, is a different question. But God, I can't remember. Maybe it was Elon that said it, but you can't sue your way into orbit. Bezos, I've got a lot of respect for what Bezos wants to do and has done, but NASA made the decision. Quit trying to. What I see Bezos doing is he's in, whether or not he realizes it or not, he's in bed with the old guys, what I would refer to as the aerospace nomenclatura, which, and at NASA, there's been a fight extending, and I bet, God, what's her face? Lori Garver would be. I'd love to find out what she knows about this. I haven't really talked to her probably in decades, but